Hello, everybody. Welcome to Therapist Take. We're going to talk about what it means to be a good communicator, so don't go anywhere. Welcome, everyone, to Therapist Take. We're going to talk today about what it means to be a good communicator. We decided we'd just kind of go back to the basics, to the fundamentals. But we ask everybody, if you're watching this live on or the rebroadcast on YouTube, just make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you can be notified when more videos are posted. But I think without further ado, we can jump right in
to a wide but very important topic.
Right. It is extremely broad topic.
Right.
So we could talk forever about this.
Right. It could go as nuanced as.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of complexities to this. So as I was sitting here thinking about how we're going to organize this, it was quite difficult because we're definitely not going to even touch the hem of the garment right now. So just real quickly, so we'll just go over the topics for you guys. We're going to talk about this idea of insecurities being injured feelings. We're going to cover the idea of being curious, being curious about the truth, basically. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. That's something I like to talk to my clients a lot about. Sure. And then we talk a lot about creating safety in relationships.
Right.
And we're going to kind of present a different take on that, on creating safety within self. So those are the three areas, and then we'll plug a few books that we like.
Yeah, they're just helpful. Yeah.
So
start with the vulnerabilities, right? Start with the insecurities.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's just start there with the whole concept of insecurities are injured feelings. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think it's you can hear us being couples therapists when we talk about this, right? Because when people are coming in to us and they're saying, "Can you believe this happened?" They're not. It's not benign. It triggers something for them, right? The tone of someone's voice, the volume of someone's voice, the way they sent the message, the context in which they sent it—that's all important information. Right. But what it's telling us, and what I think is kind of maybe the most helpful way to look at that, is what feelings, what vulnerabilities, what difficult things came up for you when those things happened, right? And they, I think the word you used was injured feelings, right? Injured feelings, which may be tripping on some core vulnerabilities, things that maybe we feel not very good about, right? Our deepest, darkest fears about ourselves.
Yeah, so I started using the term injured feelings several years ago because in thinking about some of the things that we talk about with our clients about, this idea of vulnerabilities, it's kind of I feel like it's a difficult concept to understand. We get it, but we got all the, we were inundated with this in our training and stuff. And, excuse me, but so I was thinking about what is it? Because one of the things I would talk to people a lot about is that a couple important elements of it when I'm helping them understand this concept is, one, they can't change them. Like once you have vulnerabilities, you're going to always have them to some degree, right? I mean, so, and our goal is to really take power away from them. But the other piece is that they're not true. So when we're talking about vulnerabilities, like, what's the first one you think of?
Not good enough.
Not good enough, right? I think of like unwanted, unloved. Maybe that speaks to
our vulnerabilities.
That speaks to our vulnerabilities, right?
Ooh,
those are the first popped in our mind.
Yeah.
But the reality is that you're as good as you want to be. I'm being unwanted definitely is not reflective of my reality. So if you're having those feelings at your gut level, it usually says more about what's going on about you than about how somebody else feels about you.
Sure.
So like feeling unwanted, for example, you can be unwanted. You can be unwanted in a couple relationship. That is a possibility.
Yes.
But we're talking about that kick in the gut feeling that like I'm not just unwanted here. I'm just not wanted.
Right.
period.
Right.
I'm not welcome. I don't belong.
I don't belong. Yeah, it triggers that. Yeah.
Right. Same thing with like the not good enough feeling.
Right. I'm not valuable enough to be here. I don't belong.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I think of them as injured feelings. I think most of the world will often call these insecurities.
Yeah.
You know, so like an intellectual insecurity, or I think was it Friends where he's like, "That's my thing, Ross." It's like, "What's your thing? What's your thing?" And then Ross couldn't figure out his thing.
Yeah.
And then finally he did his thing, and it's like, "There it is." He goes, "Yep, that's my thing."
Yeah.
Right there. And it's just something that we typically battle with. But the more we understand it, the more we can take power away from it.
I think that's the part that makes it an essential piece of being an effective, good communicator, is to know. Sometimes I'll use the external language of like, well, there's my vulnerability showing, there's my insecurity showing, right? Rearing its ugly head. I'm not good enough. I'm not part of this. I'm, not valuable or important. There it is showing itself.
Right.
And what makes that important in communication is that you can see it.
Right.
And to see it already means you have some distance from it. So it automatically takes, like I think you said a minute ago, it takes some of the power away, right? Rather than I am unwanted, unlovable, not good enough. Oh, there's that belief, that part, that fear that I'm not wanted.
Right. And when you do that, you're taking the conversation to a meta level, right?
Yeah.
So now
we love the word meta, right?
Of course.
Blow minds,
well,
right?
Zuckerberg ruined it for all of us.
Right.
Stole it and made it his company name.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
No, but we do like meta levels, meta communication, communicating about communicating. So even like in as silly of an example as it was in Friends, when Ross says that's my thing, like he's communicating on a meta level now. So they're having a really really small exchange about the exchange they just had, right? Yeah. And so, but I think that for, especially for couples, I think that's intimacy is found on meta levels. So that's when we talk about going deeper.
Yeah.
It's like, you can think of a meta level as going up or going down. Either way, like you're going to a new level with it, which is how intimacy is found.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Let's real quickly talk about something that we probably should start off with this. One of them, kind of a misnomer about communication. Okay, so we titled this segment like something to the effect of how to be an effective communicator or being good at communication. But one thing we don't say, and I bet you don't even say this in your personal life. Do you ever say like, my husband and I don't communicate, right? Because you're too much of a therapist, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you know what I'm getting at, right?
Yes, I do. I know exactly where you're going.
Yeah.
You can't not communicate.
Right. One cannot not communicate. Can we put that quote up on the screen, Hannah? Hannah's over here working though. Of course. Just because she has. I need to get a camera.
She's a real person.
On Hannah. Yeah. She does a lot for us on that, but Watzlawick said that, who is somebody that therapists know that we know of, anyways. They first quoted that a concept of one cannot not communicate. So then we can move into Alison Krauss, which a lot of you know, which I have her. We'll put her quote on screen too. Like my favorite song that she sings is. You say it best when you say nothing at all. So even when you're saying nothing,
you're saying a lot.
Right. So
it's another, we're name dropping here, right? Like real therapy nerds here, but it's the same research that John Gottman validated when he said that in connected personal relationships like marital relationships or whatever, that most of the communication is nonverbal. I think his numbers was something like 70% of communication is nonverbal.
Right.
Yeah.
So on that note, like when a couple comes in and someone says, my partner just isn't communicating with me. Right. What are they mostly reflecting on?
What they're actually communicating.
Which is?
I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied. This isn't working.
Yeah. No. And they're probably, their communication is at that point is very nonverbal.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
they're kind of experiencing a shutdown, or they're not speaking back, but they are communicating a lot in that, and that's and whatever that is that they're communicating, it's frustrating.
Yes, and I think that if you just sit back and start observing this. Right. Sometimes I'll have my clients do that. It's a very, very powerful experience, right? Mm-hmm. The way someone shuts a cabinet door in the kitchen, the way that someone opens or closes a door, right?
I'm smiling because did we carry that from grad school? The cabinet door?
No, that was your cohort.
Was it? I mean, that is like the most common example I use for people.
Really?
Like
yeah.
The cabinet doors being left open.
And the way you shut them.
Right.
Yeah. The tone of voice that you use, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm gonna tell a story, because I don't think my wife would care. Because there's this to this day, like there's a point in time where she was, I was in my home office and I could hear the cabinet doors getting kind of slammed, and I'm sitting there thinking that she's upset with me about something.
What I do.
She's wanting me to know, right? And so I confronted about her because I thought she's being passive aggressive. Trying to let me communicate with me by slamming the cabinet doors. And to this day, she would tell you that had nothing to do, whatever was going on for her had nothing to do with me. But that goes back to how injured feelings work, right? Like, so I'm sitting there thinking, like, for some reason, this nonverbal communication has something to do with me. Why would I think that?
Right, can't be.
You're not. See, Carrie's over there thinking, "Oh, I can tell you why."
I can tell you what the problem is.
You want me to answer that question?
That's one other episode.
Yeah. So, let's move on into talking about the importance of being curious about the truth.
Absolutely, right. And I think this is a really hard thing to do. I think this is quite a challenge. Extremely, because I think that being curious rather than leaping to our favorite word, right, in couples therapy, making assumptions.
Right. Yeah.
It requires, the first thing I usually try to actually help people with and making space for this is just giving yourself a pause. Right. And from a kind of a brain perspective, in a sense, you're giving your frontal lobe a chance to catch up, because curiosity comes from the part of our brain that can be creative and isn't obsessed with confirming an outcome, right? It isn't about survival, right? Curiosity is, in a sense, being able to not worry about your survival and your safety and to explore. Right. And so to take a pause in an exchange with your partner, or you're having injured feelings, and to be curious instead of protect yourself from these assumptions that you've made. It's really hard to do, because most people come into us and they'll say, so if I say this, I know my partner will say this. If I do this, I know my partner will do that. And you know what? They're usually pretty right? Sure. They've got the script down. But what that also says is that they're all living in kind of a world of assumptions, right? And these automatic responses. And what can happen if we slow down, take a beat, and be curious?
Sure.
Right.
So the conundrum there too is if they know their patterns. So you're right that a lot of times their assumptions are not flawed, or I mean they're
correct.
They're more correct than not.
Right.
A lot of the times. So how can we then justify being curious when they have an accurate assumption about how this person will or won't respond? And I think that goes kind of what you're reflecting on is what part of the brain is in charge. And so when you're making assumptions, or you're defensive, and your assumptions line up with defensiveness, I think that's the survivor brain. So that being curious in war is probably not a good idea
to go wandering around
unless you have a very strong defense structure in place, a system in place to protect you, because you're going, I would think anyways, I never was in the military, but I would think that I probably need to assume danger first before I assume something else, right?
Right.
Not danger.
And safety first, as we always say across culture. Yeah.
And so the reality is that like when we're grown, now I'm speaking separately aside from like relationships, situations that are physically dangerous, so I'm talking about the relationships that we're in where we're not really worried about being in danger physically.
Right, no abusive relationships.
Sure.
Right.
So even though someone might be accurate on that, if I do this, then this person likely is going to respond defensively, or from their survivor brain. It's kind of, I think what's important is trying to take that pause that you're talking about and remember that you're not at war. Right. I can be curious here. My feelings aren't going to hurt me. Their feelings aren't going to hurt me. They're not dangerous in the sense of they're putting me in physical danger. They might hurt my feelings, but I'm a grown person that if the situation is such where I am feeling unsafe, even emotionally unsafe, I don't have to stay in that situation.
Right. I don't have to continue to be unsafe. Right.
Right. I can at minimum or at most, I guess I could walk away.
Yeah. Right.
From that if I need to.
Right.
Now, just again, disclaimer, that's if you're in a situation where there is physical safety, obviously we would never encourage you to do that. Right.
Right.
Being physically safe would be priority one. But aside from that, it's reminding you that I do think the first step, as you said, is taking that pause. And then reminding yourself, you're okay.
Yes.
I'm okay.
Right. Just because it doesn't feel good doesn't mean you're not okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I want to talk a little bit more about. We're kind of getting into the last point.
Yeah, you can see it moving right into it. Yeah.
But I want to talk. I want to say something else about being curious about the truth. I call this finding the nugget of truth. So, a lot of times in couple relationships, it's just this way with any relationship really, that it's easy to identify where you think the other person's wrong.
Yeah.
Right. That's
automatic.
It's easy for everybody, right? And they might be like 95% wrong.
Sure.
And you might be able to give a compelling argument on why they're 95% wrong.
Yep.
Right. But then if I'm the other person and I'm like, okay, I'm buying into, I'm seeing where I went wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not all wrong.
Where I went wrong.
I can't be. Most people aren't all wrong on something. So if I'm 95% wrong, I'm 5% right. Right. I want to know his laughter.
You're such a therapist. Can't just be right or wrong. How annoying are we?
Or does that make me the stereotypical male, basically?
Well, absolutely. You can't divorce yourself of that, right? But
that's my argument. Like, I'm not all wrong, right, babe?
That'll go over real well, right? And it does in our sessions, right? People love that. Well,
yeah,
sure.
But it's easy. Again, I think that's why arguments happen, because you're not. Most people, when they're arguing about something, or at least from my experience in working with people, they're on point to some degree. I mean. On both sides, like their frustrations and the thing they're upset about is valid.
Yes.
What's hard in those moments is identifying, really working hard to try to find what I call that nugget of truth. That's that little 5% of like, what are they onto? Like, what are they experiencing that needs to be validated?
Yeah.
And instead of focusing on how they went about validating, or how they went about communicating it, or what their, the misinterpretations of my messages and things. What is going on from this person right now that is true for them? And most of the time, they're not crazy people.
Right.
We don't like to use that word in here, but it's true. Like this part is not. We're not talking about dealing with people that are mentally insane,
right?
Or
they can't grasp reality.
Legally insane,
right?
Mentally unstable,
right?
Right. Say that again.
They can't grasp reality.
They can't grasp reality.
Right.
So finding that nugget of truth is a lot more challenging, but it requires to be curious when your survivor brain is lighting up, wanting to get defensive,
protect you.
Right. I mean, when your survivor brain is interpreting a message that's saying like, I feel like that you're saying I'm a piece of crap.
Right.
Right. And then the therapists are saying you need to get curious about that. Like, that's just not natural.
Yeah,
right?
it sounds almost sometimes like insult to injury.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like,
what do you mean I need to do something?
Help me understand.
Yes.
Two phrases that I stole from Hal Runkle, who wrote Scream Free Parenting and Scream Free Marriage, which is about creating a pause, is help me understand and tell me more. But and so I kind of get this deer in the headlight looks from my clients that are like, so when it feels like they're saying I'm a piece of crap, you're wanting me to say, tell me more? And I'm like,
yep.
Then then I have imposter syndrome, which Josie and Mary talked about in there.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right. No, but it is.
Yeah.
I think we do need to get curious about tell me more, because I think what you end up finding out is they're probably not saying that.
Right.
What you think they're saying is not what's being said.
Sure. And there's always more. There is always more. Which kind of does nicely flow into our last point, right?
Right.
And this one, again, this is all challenging. Being a good communicator is hard. We've studied this, we worked with this, and we're always struggling with it too, right? As professionals and as real people. So there's no expectation here that you learn how to do this and then you achieve good communication status and you never have problems anymore, right?
Sure.
But every single one of these points is, I think, a really, really lucrative task to take on, right? And so the last point of today is to talk about how to create safety within.
Right.
And if you can, really invest in that, the payoff is huge.
Right. So, we were talking about this just a little bit before we went live, that most of what we hear in couple relationships, which is true, is creating an environment of emotional safety within that relationship, right?
Yeah, within.
So so what that often looks like in sessions are or will be like a couple, one or both saying that I don't feel safe with this person, and then say, so Mr. Therapist, help my partner make the changes they need to make so I can feel safe,
do better
relationally, right? And that's not completely unfounded, or it's not off. I mean, there is that does have to happen, but that's not where I think it begins. Right. I think it begins with self, right? Because remember, we're not talking about relationships where there is a risk or a high risk of being physically unsafe. We're talking about just not feeling safe enough to talk about your feelings because you're afraid they're going to get thrown back at you, or that certain aspects of your words or your actions are going to get weaponized against you, things like that. Yeah. But it's remember that feeling of unsafety is all happening within the self, right? And so it's I think where people have to begin is really learning how to be really good about what they need to do to create to be safe in any context, emotional context. Right. It's not easy. It's difficult. Yeah. But it's learning how to experience something that is difficult and then respond to it in a way that where you're keeping the integrity of your safe place, I guess, in a way.
Sure. I think that the way to do this is a important word, and it's about attunement, right? So being in tune and aware of what's going on for you. What are you thinking? What are you feeling emotionally? What's your body? What messages are you getting from your body, right? And all of that is sending, important information that if you can pause, if you can develop this I think it's somewhat of a skill, right, to take in this information. And you can ask yourself, so what's going on for me and what do I need to do? One of my favorite mantras for myself and that I pass on to my clients is to kind of connect to the belief, the mantra, the settling, center of that I know how to take care of myself. I know what I need to do when I need to do it. I think those are really, really, really helpful perspectives, and I think being in tune means that you can create safety within yourself. So if you know that this is hard for you, what do you need to do for yourself, and how do you advocate, and how do you make that known, and how do you also keep maybe when do you make it known, and how do you keep some of it for yourself? This is the responsibility though of the person, right, not the coupleship. Exactly. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And then from there you could move. You start learning. If your partner's doing that too, you're basically creating a dance together where your efforts toward creating safety you try to start figuring out a rhythm with it, basically. And that's how, in my opinion, how emotional safety is created in between the couple.
Right.
It does remind me, though, I don't know if you remember that clip. It's one of my favorite clips on the internet from Van Jones when he's speaking to a group of college students, and he's mainly talking about, it's kind of the rise of this idea of safe spaces and trigger warnings and things like that. And so everything that he's saying to this, I don't think would it work perfectly with the level of intimacy that's involved and vulnerability that's supposed to be involved in a couple relationship. But it's that clip where he said, like, I'm not going to pave the jungle for you. We are not going to pave the jungle for you. Put on some boots. So he's talking about venture. Get curious is what he's saying.
Yeah.
Venture out into the dangers of, and he's speaking emotionally here. Into or even intellectually. Into concepts and ideals and things that are difficult and challenging, and some of them are good and some of them aren't good. Get out there and experience them. And he said, I want you to be offended. He's talking to college students. I want you to be offended every day on this campus, and then learn how to speak back. Yeah. He's talking about this is really important for growth. And I think where that does apply to relationships is like arguments. If a couple came into you and said, like, we never argue.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
They don't talk.
They haven't been together that long.
Yeah, they're either new or they're shut down. Right.
Yeah. They are. I think that either they're lying, or they're very emotionally distant and not connected, or they just haven't been together long enough, to start having these arguments, But the thing about arguments is that I don't think people are very good about knowing how to, discern the difference between a healthy argument and one that's not.
Right. But I think that's why knowing how to take care of yourself means you'll be able to maybe even discern the difference. And when you get out into that jungle and it is unsafe, you know what you need to do to get there. And it's making me think of something else. We're quoting therapists today, I guess, but
or political analysts.
Or political analysts, right? He's not a very friendly therapist. But Alexandra Katahaka said something one time she said she tells her clients a lot of, please state the obvious. Right? And I think that's a great way of saying state the obvious, right?
That makes me feel
right.
I don't know if I want to do that.
I don't know if I want to do. So if that's something like, I can't have this discussion right now. This isn't going to work for me at this moment. I don't know what to say to that. Those statements, we often, I think, don't say them because they seem so obvious, and especially in couples who've been together for a long time, they'll say things like, you should already know this. You know that about me. Why do I have to say that? And let's go ahead and let's work through that. Maybe if you can learn about how to take care of yourself and go ahead and state the obvious, right? That maybe actually is going to help everybody to actually know what's going on. Yeah.
No, yeah, I completely agree. So we could keep going on and
on. And now part 2 becomes...
Stay tuned for the next 3 hours of this episode.
Of us just musing around the world of communication.
Let's go ahead and end on just giving a few book recommendations.
Yeah.
And if anything else comes to mind while we're talking, feel free to mention it.
Yeah.
But we have two that are almost embarrassed to put them up because they're so commonly used, but they really are good books.
But today is about good communication, so it is basic. And remember how important the basics are.
Right.
Basics of food, basics of sleep, basics of good communication.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So the Will Smith. No,
don't you do it. Don't you do it. Hannah's going to quit.
Yeah. They tease me for liking the Will Smith book too much.
A lot.
The first one is the John Gottman, the 7, you mentioned John Gottman earlier, 7 Principles for Making a Marriage Work.
Yeah.
I mean, this book is like 20 years old or more.
And it is just as helpful today as it was then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's a good one. We should have an image of that, but I'll make sure to put links to all these books, and even to like some of the clips we mentioned and things like that. I'll try to link that as well. The other one too, which is also a very old book, but still holds up, is The 5 Love Languages.
Yeah, it gives people a lot of stuff to talk about. I think it helps people kind of do the things we talked about today, right?
What would your summary of The 5 Love Languages be? If you were trying to sell it to someone, you'd say this book is.
It helps you identify more maybe of what you need and how often we love people by giving them what we need, not paying attention to what they need.
Right.
Because I haven't met a whole lot of people that are in committed relationships with people that have the same amount or degree or type of love language, right?
Right, exactly. One that isn't, people might not be as familiar with, is a book that I am super crazy about right now called The Untethered Soul. And this gets into more of what Carrie was talking about earlier about really being still, creating that pause and learning to be present within the self. And really, it's a book that it's kind of existential, which I like books like that. But if you can kind of get past that, if you have trouble with books like that, get past that, just kind of think about it in a sense of this is really an exploration of self, you know, and I think Michael Singer, who wrote the book, does a good job of helping you take a deep dive into these complexities and how we typically operate, which is true for most people. Like, it's just different. It's the same, but it just manifests differently. But it's all the basics are there for most people. But that's a really good book to I think to help kind of tend to the well, it really would tend to all these points, but you know, we ended with the thing that where it should begin, which is creating safety within self, and that's really where it all begins. And it kind of serves as an umbrella focus or an umbrella goal for the other things too. So
for good communication, really. Okay, well, we have to just end, right?
We just have to, you know, there's never no goodbyes, just see you later.
Just see you later.
There'll always be more to talk about. So
always.
But we appreciate you watching and the support that you have for these shows and our channel. Please make sure you subscribe to our channel on YouTube and ring the bell so you can be notified when more videos are posted. But also head on over to Facebook if you haven't been there, and like our page there, and you can follow us with, you know, different posts that we have there too. So I appreciate you.
Thank you.